Let's Live, powered by Ronaldo, day 3, approaching half time on day 3, in fact. And listen, we're going to be speaking about women's sport in this next panel. It's going to be a very busy panel, and we're having a few little technical issues connecting with all of our guests from all over the world, because, of course, as you know, World Football Summit is where the football industry meets. We're battling a little bit with the technology right now, but we will do our very best. And whilst that tech team are working so hard behind the scenes to establish all the necessary connections, let me just give you a brief little intro to the session. And listen, we've had lots of different declarations and statements during this coronavirus pandemic, but I'd like to start with a quote taken from a FIFPro paper published in April. The current situation regarding coronavirus is likely to present an almost existential threat to the women's game if no specific considerations are given to protect the women's football industry. There's no point in sugarcoating this. It is a stark possibility that women's sport could return to being undervalued, underfunded, and invisible. Surely, though, it's also unthinkable, isn't it? I mean, can you imagine going back to a landscape without women's sport? Maybe what we can do instead is emerge from this crisis with a renewed urgency to do what is right. It's not the time to bail or back out. It's time to reinforce the support of women's sport and help those heading it up to take confident strides forward. You can see all of these speakers here are people who are doing exactly that. So this session is entitled Women's Sport, the Necessary Steps for a Progressive Future, in partnership with Visa. And I'm sure our panel will give us a few ideas as to how that will be achieved. Here they are. Director of Women's Football at the Swiss Football Association, Tatiana Henny. Also Global Director of the Women's Game at Copper 90, Bex Smith. We hope that we will have with us the founder and director of the Girl Power organization, Calda Porpal. We're trying to establish connection with her, and the president of the Spanish Basketball Federation, Jorge Garbajosa, and your moderator, senior legal counsel at FIFPro, Alexandra Gomez Brunevelt. Alexandra, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I think something really relevant to mention from all these wonderful speakers I have the honor to moderate is that they're all former players, which is amazing. And this is what we want to see, right? From FIFPro, to see the players now leading the way, giving the example, and really operating as role models. So thank you so much for being here. And well, 1 year back, we had the Women World Cup in France, which was amazing in every sense. It led to so many changes also in culture and in the way women football is seen. Since that moment, women football evolved in many ways in different countries. Also, other women's sports have been doing much better in the last year, and female athletes as well. Now we have this COVID-19 problem that is a little bit putting in danger all the progress that women football has had. But in order not to have the women football in this hazardous situation, we need to build a very strong women football. And that's what we want to talk about a little bit with these wonderful speakers. So thank you so much for being here. And let's already jump into the questions so that we can hear the most out of them. So especially addressed to Tatiana and Bex, and Khalida, if she can hear us. In your experience as elite football players, what has changed for the positive in the women's game, and what still needs to be changed? So maybe Bex, you can start.
Oh, lots has changed. Even since 7 years ago, a lot has changed. I think there's more technology and data in sports. I think the quality of the sport has gone up. Participation has certainly increased, and that leads to the increase in the quality of the game. But also, I think that there's been more interest from broadcasters and media, which is so important for the visibility of the sport, so that people know who the characters are, so that fans can then follow those stories and get interested in the sport. And for me, that's kind of the next step that the sport needs to be taking.
Amazing. Khalida, any views on this?
Thank you. I think if we compare, it's a lot of changes and a lot of positive changes in women's game. And I think in terms of like visibility, in terms of like the publicity and the fans that women's football got, and also the people, like the sponsors, the clubs and the governing bodies are interested in women's football. if we compare from the time especially that I started. And also the technology actually helped us a lot, and we can see already that the media is also interested, and media helped women's football a lot in terms of progress and development, and also in visibility of women's football. But that's not enough. We will talk later about that. But it's a lot of positive changes.
Tatiana, are you in? I don't see her now.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good.
We'd like to also hear from your point of view. So, what positive changes in women football, and what still needs to change?
Yeah, there's not much to add to these two experts. My generation, I think a bit older than these two, and so much more has changed since I played, and there's nothing to compare. But I think to summarize it, I really think it's the respect towards the players which has changed from being just somebody who had to basically do whatever they love to do because they wanted to and not because they were supported to a momentum where we are today, where you can see that you can be a professional player, you can have a living out of it, and the society in many countries, unfortunately not in all, but in many countries, supports you and makes sure you can actually live your dream. But as Khalida said, there's a long way to go to much more. But for the moment, I think a lot has changed for the good.
Great. Jorge, what is the role do you think men have, and male players in particular, in the development of women sport? Any positive experiences to share in the field of basketball that you can share with us?
Sure. For me, let me say that it's a great honor in two different ways to be here, because first of all, to join a panel with these three very important women in football, in sport, is a pleasure for me. And then to have the opportunity to talk about basketball in this such an important panel. About the commitment, let's say, of the men's basketball players with the women is, here in Spain, in our federation, is 100%. As an example, I could explain that, for example, Pau Gasol, which is our main big star in the men's basketball, in all Spanish basketball, he has been between several different webinars during this coronavirus time, and the quality between the men's and the women's in these webinars for him was completely high, 50%. We can say that the best woman player here in Spain, which is Alba Torrens, have participated on them. Women's coaches also, Becky Hammond from the NBA, and all different Spanish coaches and Spanish referees have been participating. So, plus then, they would like to say that here in the basketball is a family here in Spain. In the family, half of the members are men and half of the members are obviously women also.
Great, good to hear. And in terms of investment, is it also equal, similar?
For us as federation, I would say it's not equal, because in the last few years we are investing even more money, resources, and time, human resources also, on women than in men. Men is big, is really big here in Spain. Women's is not yet. It will be. How? Somebody said before that the visibility in the investment on TV productions is a crucial issue, and we are proud to say that the first league who was shown in TV in social media, for first time every week, it was our women's league here in Spain, our Liga Femenina Endesa, which is so proud for us. But at the same time, we are investing on TV production to show our league in TV, in the traditional TV, let's say. And then for us, we organized in 2018 the World Cup, the Women's World Cup in Tenerife, in Canary Island. And after that, big moment for the women's basketball here in Spain. That year, we had 20,000 more girls playing basketball after this World Cup. So what we did right after is organize. We asked to the International Federation to organize the European basketball, the women's basketball, and we will organize it in 2021. So big events organizing big events here in Spain, investment on TV production, investment on the development of the clubs and the players. For the 2021-22, we will have new third women's league here in Spain, completely equal with the men's league here in Spain. So, as I said in the beginning, we are investment a little bit more on women's basketball than in men's basketball.
Amazing. That is exactly what we want to hear. So congratulations, really, because unfortunately it's not the most common thing to hear. And especially it's great to see men supporting this side by side with women, because it's not a women issue, as I always say. So it's great to hear this. And Jorge, I still want to ask you one further question. When you were still playing, were you conscious of the difference between male players and women players on treatment, or did you give that a thought even, or was it something that you were focused on playing and you didn't really pay attention to it?
Being totally honest, in the past when I was a player, I didn't think about it, being totally honest. Then when I had the honor to be elected as the president of the federation, and you see the budget of the federation and how much you invest on men's basketball and on women's basketball, I saw that the difference was huge. As a small example, but the women's were staying in the hotels on 3 stars hotel, and the men's on 5 stars hotel, which is not is not we cannot afford to do this. So since the beginning, for example, the bonus when they get a medal on a Eurobasket or on a World Championship, the bonus for the men and the women are completely equal. The money that they get for every day that they practice or they play games is completely equal. Also, it's just a matter. It's not a matter of recognition. It's a matter of to be fair, because their effort, their show that they put on the court every single day is the same. So they have to get the same from our federation.
Exactly, amazing. Well, thanks so much, and I think it's also good to realize that we need to raise awareness on players, because sometimes it's not that they are male players. I mean, that they don't want to help, but it's like they don't really think about it that much. So it's I think it's an interesting point, and thank you so much, Jorge. Tatiana, are the necessary structures there for the development of the women's game? What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think they're there, and it's nice to see what Jorge says, because it would be a dream come true if other associations and other sports would treat the women's game in the same way. So no, I don't think they're there. And what strikes me all the time is, if people get aware, like players, if you talk to them, they're immediately male players. I mean, usually they're super supportive and help and open doors. If you talk to people, in society, they're open to women's sports. If you talk to people now in the economy, they see the benefits, and it's just developing everywhere. But we need to bring the message there. And where we still struggle is actually in the places where changes could be made immediately, and that's the sports organizations. And these organizations quite often, in my opinion, do a bit more talking than actually doing. And they could really reinforce the case of women's sports so much quicker and put the right structures in place. So in a nutshell, I don't think it's there. And I think we need, for women's sports, and in my case for women's football, you need women's football expertise. That can be men and women, but of course, a majority of women, I guess, if you talk about women's football, should deal with those topics around their sports. Decisions should not be taken by people who actually have little experience and little know-how.
Have you seen lately, let's say in the last years, more impact of women in the sport, in the different structures, more in the leadership as well, Tatiana? Or is there still a big gap?
No, I think there's still a big gap. If you consider female representation of 30% as something which is adequate or helpful for the business, then I don't think we have 30%. But we clearly see a trend, and we see more and more women in decision-making bodies. But that's a little bit the problem. We have two topics here. We have women in sports or women in football, and we have women's football, and that's just not the same. So I think we need more women involved, but that can be a woman who is an expert on marketing, on communication, finances, or whatever, and she runs men's football. So we need more women in football for a better product and for more success in football, and we need more structures for women's football, which in my case gets a bit forgotten in the gender discussion we have in the last years. So we have more women, but I don't really necessarily see better women's football structures.
And could you give us maybe an example on which structures could help so that we
yeah, I think women's football is a business case. I think it's the biggest growth opportunity in terms of participation, in terms of sponsorship partnerships, media partnerships. And if you don't have a proper business plan and an investment behind, you just don't get the results as quickly as you can. And if I look at the FIFA Women's World Cup as an example, which still has not its own sponsorship packages, it's not unbundled as far as I know, and that might have reasons for it because maybe the contracts are going so long that they can't unbundle it. But I haven't really seen a plan. Whereas at the UEFA level, you see that there are specific sponsors for the Women's Euro. So there is a momentum for a commercial business case for women's football, and to really convince the last people who are still not seeing the opportunity and the potential. I think we need some money coming into women's football, and you can actually make a business case, but you need a decent plan, and I think that's just really important.
I think that also connected to this is the media, right? Yesterday I was participating in a conference of UN Women, and there was a reporter talking about how little news there are on women's sports in general, and when there are news on women's sports, many times they're not really on the sport but on other things, secondary, superficial, on the looks of the players or whatever. And I do believe it has dropped a little bit because now the society is a little bit more critical on this, and they're like, okay, what are you saying? It's true, it's happening a bit more, thankfully, but it still happens a lot. So probably if the media would bring also a bit more importance to what happens in women's sports in general, everything would be easier. So maybe for all the panelists, for Khalida as well, what do you think is the impact of the media in women football in particular, and the connection also to the social impact of the women sport?
I think first of all, as I know that media has huge impact in women, has had a huge impact in women's football, and it helps women's football a lot. But we have to also understand that the way also there are some media that communicate is it's wrong. We have to stop comparing women's football and men's football. Women's football is a beautiful product, and we have to communicate it. We have to tell the story differently. And this is what the media, most of the media channels, are doing this mistake by comparing women's football, and that's why we are getting hurt in terms of sponsorship deals in so many ways, and also getting fans. Media can play a role in terms of visibility. It's women's football, as I said, it is a beautiful product, and the story of women's football should not be only specifically football. It is the journey of each player that they take, and women's football is different, and it's in its way, it has a journey that it can gain its own fans. But unfortunately, the communication has been so wrong that we still couldn't manage to get where we are or where women's football belong to. And also, in terms of the sponsorship deals, especially I'm working in a football club that has both men's and women's football. The way we communicate with our sponsors, it's not about comparing the women's and men's game, but also their journey, where our female football players play an amazing role in society as a great role models. For example, we have a player from Faroe Islands, where she started playing with their national team and also with this club at FC Nordsjælland in Denmark. And because the way that we communicated and told her, not only the football, but also her journey that as a player, as a female football player, that she comes and play football at the same time she studies and she works, and how impact she can bring in football and also in the society. This is the stories that we tell through the media, and so many women from that island is interested to join football. These are the stories that we should tell, and also the visibility around women's football is very important, and it brings a huge impact. And also the creating the opportunity for women to tell their stories, because they are the amazing role models, and there is plans that only come for women's football. And that's quite important, and we should tell those.
Exactly. I think that also if we look at women football, there are some things where women are really leading, and in terms of role modeling, in terms of studying and being able to do both things, to play football professionally but also follow a career. We see in women football lots of very highly educated women that have a lot to say, and probably that's also connected to how they are expressing themselves in the media, how they put through strong messages, how they are a little bit more political, if you want to say it in a if you want to describe it in a word, maybe. But I think it was pretty I don't know if surprising, but something to highlight and to pay attention to. If we looked at the awards of the best of FIFA, where Messi won the best for the male player, and Megan Rapinoe for the women player, and then you looked at their speeches, and without needing to compare them, you see how different they were. So Rapinoe was really giving a political stand, where Messi was not, where he was giving more a personal speech, let's say. And that is maybe connected to everything that I was saying regarding the education, but also connected to what is needed, because of course men do not need to preach a lot, because they already have a certain status in general, at least in a high level in football, whereas for women players, they really need to push the change in order to get where they want to get. So I think it's quite interesting to see the changes. Bex, can you tell us a little bit more on the role of players in the development of the game from a brand, media, and storytelling point of view?
Yeah, no, I think it just kind of leads on to what you were saying, Alexandra, that I think actually media has an even bigger role to play than just giving visibility. I think that just in the way that how media divides the time that women get and men get, it puts a value on it, and it shows that actually men are worth more and are valued more, and people should actually then invest more in the men's side of the game, which is clearly, as we see, as Tatiana mentioned, and Jorge as well, that actually in terms of equity, women's sports needs a little bit more investment right now. So I think media plays a massive role in terms of education, and also not only the storytelling as well. But I think going back to your actual question about the players, I think that's kind of where the hub of where women's sports has always grown. I think what you mentioned, it that women are, the players always feel like they're the ones that are advocating the most for the sport. They're the ones that are posting on their social media accounts, hey, come buy tickets, come to the stadium, come watch our games, come support our sport. And I think that's where the hub of storytelling really needs to be. And so when you look at the growth of the sport, which I also agree with Tatiana, it's the biggest growth opportunity in sports now is women's sports, and specifically in football. That at the hub of that and at the heart of that is the players, and that's where brands have a really big opportunity, because they play such an important role. I mean, look, Visa sponsoring all of the panels on the women's football parts of the WFS, they play a very important role in elevating the value of female athletes and therefore the sports, female sports. And I think, I think the players kind of always sit at the hub of that. And if we, instead of going out, looking out in, if we actually take the players looking outwards and give them more of a voice, I think that the sport will be more authentic and more relevant for more fans as well.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I was thinking like from FIFPro, we are also trying to develop that more, because of course the more united players are, then the better results you will always get. And traditionally, because women players in general have not been considered professional players, sometimes because they did not fit into the concept of FIFA of the employment contract plus receiving more money than the expenses to go to train, and sometimes just unilaterally because they were women and therefore they were amateur and it didn't really matter how much they earned, like the case of Italy, where they were amateur and they could earn 1,000 euros or more and they would still be called amateur. But I think that regardless of that, I think it really helps a lot to get them united together. And as I said, with the education that they already have and this thrive that they have to improve the game, it's the best moment now to bring it forward and reach a higher standard. And in FIFPro we have been studying a little bit the women football in general, but also we have put a little bit more interest on the effects of the COVID-19 in women football, because of course, as everyone that is interested in football in general and in women football, of course, as well in particular, we were really worried on what would happen. So we did some research, and what we are encouraging and suggesting is that actually in this moment it's not enough. It's a little bit what Jorge was saying. In this moment it's not enough to say, oh, okay, we will invest the same in women football, which is not even the case by far anywhere. But imagine, it should be even more. Like, they need extra support because the structures are weak, and the basis is still not there. So we have faced situations, just to give a couple of examples, but like in Colombia or in Venezuela, where the tournament had not yet started when the COVID-19 was declared a pandemic, and then everything was stopped. So they had not yet signed their contracts, and they of course will not, because the clubs were like, okay, easy peasy, we have not signed it yet, so see you next year. So for the whole year they will not have a contract, and of course, as you know, having been players, not to play for a full year is very critical. So the situation is very difficult. We are really positive, and we think that women football will come out stronger from this. But things need to be done, and things need to change. And very importantly, and I wanted to ask you about that as well, we consider that it's very important to structure the competitions in a better way. So to have more competitions for women football, because a little bit in opposition to what happens with male football, where at the very elite level they have, in our view and according to our research, too many games. In women football, it's in general too little games, and of course this doesn't help the development. So considering that, and also looking at the working conditions of players and the tournament conditions of players in women football and in women's sports in general, would you give us just like a 1 minute summary, because now I'm seeing that we only have 5 minutes to go, 1 minute summary on which things you think are really crucial to achieve in order to put women football and women's sports, where it should be? If we can start with Khalida.
I think it's very important to create a more job opportunity, and also education opportunity for women, and to gain skills and to be more involved in developing women's game. We need more women.
Okay, great. Jorge?
I would like to say a couple of things. As a federation, very briefly, we have to find the balance between the professionalism of the players, which is out of question, and don't, because we start with this investment in all these different ways on the women's basketball, so we have to try to to build the house from the floor to arrive to the roof. We have to invest on visibility, invest on promotion, invest on organization of big events to try to develop the structures of our clubs to find this, which is our goal, a professionalism of all our players, coaches, referees, etc., etc. And last thing, sometimes from the main point of view, we show that the investment on women's sport is like a kind of, understand me, it's a kind of charity. No, it's not a charity. It's a strategic pillar of the development, at least in Spain, of our sport. Here's no difference between men and women. Our goal is to develop our sport. And one of the main pillars is the women's basketball to try to reach our goals.
Thank you so much. Yes, great. Bex?
Yeah, I think just to reiterate that, I think the structures need to be in the right place, and if you have the right structures, a great example of that was what the DFB did with the Solidarity Fund, that the top 4 clubs then distributed actually went to women's football because that was the equitable thing to do. So I think those structures, when you have an example of structures like that and people in decision-making powers that has a diverse team, that really helps to make the right decisions to get the right investment in the right way to women's sports. And again, I think there needs to be more support to players because that is the quality of the sport that is retained and also will increase over years. And then more investment and more brands and more visibility due to that in order to grow the sport for long term.
Thank you, Bex. Tatiana?
Yeah, I'm a believer in top-down approach. I think if you say too many matches, that's maybe true for the whole world except Europe, where actually players face too many matches, considering that they have dual careers and study and work to do, most of them. But so I think a top-down approach with FIFA, UEFA confederations taking their national associations under more control. There should be proper continental qualification competitions, a proper World Cup qualification, which means every national association has to play 4, 5, 6 matches a year. If the national association takes a strong lead on that, makes contracts with players, puts them in a safe environment, which is so important for the whole world, that these female players are safe and protected, then I think we have a top-down approach with a structure which should be suitable and should be healthy and good for the players. And then you go down to the club level, but that's the next step. And I think if we can achieve that top-down approach, we have already done a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we have had really very interesting views. I think we also have to remember that FIFA is a not-for-profit organization, and that they have in their statutes that there won't be any gender discrimination, very particular, and we still have a prize money that is so many times more. I think the prize money for the Women World Cup is 7.5% of the males World Cup, and it is not really connected to the revenue of the World Cup. That is, it's just an example to put out there to see. I think we really need to review all the structures. I think there has been a great change in the last years, and there's much more attention being given also from these organizations like FIFA and the confederations as well. But there's still a lot to do. It looks like a lot what has been done because so little has been done before. But I think that, well, everyone working together, we can really build a much better women football. And I don't think COVID-19 will be able to damage that. So thank you so much all for your input. It was great.
Thanks a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you
you
so much, Alexandra. And wow, timekeeping absolutely on point. And that's given the fact that we had a few little issues at the start, and apologies for that. But you marshaled the chat ever so well. Just to reprise a few themes there, just talking about the challenges first of all. And of course, we need to understand what they are to find out what the solutions are. Jorge telling us a little bit about, anecdotally, the different treatment of women's professionals and men's professional players, and says it's not a matter of special recognition, it's a question of fairness. And that's really what's at the heart of this. And some really strong views from Tatiana, saying that the struggle is where changes can be made immediately. Sports organizations who do more talking than doing. That really chimed very strongly. And that, yes, there's a distinction that has to be made between women's football and women in football that I think semantically people don't quite understand yet, but it needs to be made clearer. And Carla talking about the comparison of women's football and men's football just not being helpful at times, that they're different beasts and you have to sell the story differently. That's reflected, by the way, in one of our polls where we asked our audience which of the following areas needs more improvement for women's football to continue growing: education and training, playing conditions, working conditions, tournament conditions, and social and media impact. Well, of course, the answer is all of them. However, social and media impact, with 45% of the votes, so almost half of our audience going with that option. And again, from Bex about, women's footballers particularly maximising their platforms. That's the heart of the growth. That's where you can see the women's game really having such a USP, which is very, very strong. And again, talking a little bit about not being a charity, but being a strategic pillar of development. I mean, if you're a brand, surely the smart game right now is to make a beeline for women's sport and say, this is where we are going to be investing, not just financially, but in other ways too. And hopefully we will see that in years to come. As you say, Alexandra, perhaps really only little bits have changed so far. We hope that the greatest changes is yet to come. So Tatiana, Bex, Carolina, Jorge and Alexandra, thank you so much for your input on this panel. We really do appreciate you being part of WFS Live, powered by Ronaldo. We're going to continue at 14:40 Central European time with a session entitled Acquiring the Golden Fan Profile. How can the industry activate better? It's in partnership with Cheetah Digital. So we'll see you in just over 5 minutes' time.